All right, good morning, guys. Today is Wednesday. We're going to be moving on into Romeo and Juliet today, so you will need your books. Um, Yesterday on Schoology, I gave you guys a poll to see how we would go about reading the rest of Act 2 together. Notice I said Act 2 together because I'm determined that we're going to get together. I mean, what if we don't get a chance to see each other? Like for the rest of the school year, nobody wants to do Google Meet. There was like 3 people who voted for Google Meet. I'm going to try not to be offended by the 6 people who want me just to leave you guys the hell alone. I don't. Maybe the quarantine's getting to you, and you just want to be alone. Um, I don't handle the quarantine especially well. I guess I'm a little bit too much of an extrovert, so I would love to have a Google Meet. But, you know me. I do also enjoy making these videos for you. So hopefully you guys will get something out of this. Today we're going to read a couple of scenes together. Scene 3 and scene 4. We're going to move on from the balcony scene that you guys have been playing with for the last couple of days. And I was reading your text messages that you guys were creating. Those are great so far. Keep those rolling in if you have not already. And let's talk about scene 3. Scene 3 takes us to, it says here on page 802, is at Friar Lawrence's cell. And this is a character we haven't met yet. But I want you to consider Friar Lawrence as a character who is very similar the way the nurse is to Juliet. The nurse is a character who is comforting and has a very close relationship, almost like a parent figure. And that's kind of what the friar is to Romeo. So at the very end of scene 2, after they have a hard time leaving, like, baby, I don't want to go. Oh my, I love you so much. No, I love you. No, I love you. No, you are the best. We should get married. If you guys noticed, yes, things are moving rapidly. And Juliet wants to know that he's legitimately after her and wants to marry her. And he does. One of the last things he says here on line 186 in scene 2, he says, would I were sleep and peace so sweet to rest, hence I will to my ghostly friar's close cell, his help to crave and my dear hap to tell. So in this case, he's leaving, it's late at night, but he's not going home to go to bed. He's got to move on and go talk to Friar Lawrence because he's got to give him the good news. And it just so happens he's a friar, he could also marry them. So he's going to make his way to Friar Lawrence in scene 3. So follow along here on page 802 as we get into this and meet this new character. All right. Enter Friar Lawrence alone with a basket. So the scene starts with him by himself. Okay. The gray-eyed morn smiles on the frowning night, checkering the eastern clouds with streaks of light. In flecked darkness, like a drunkard reels from forth day's path and Titan's burning wheels. Now, ere the sun advance his burning eye, the day to cheer and night's dank dew to dry, I must upfill this osier cage of ours with baleful weeds and precious juiced flowers. The earth that's nature's mother in her tomb, what is her bearing grave? That is her womb. And from her womb children of divers kind, we sucking on her natural bosom find. Many for many virtues excellent, none but for some, and yet all different. Oh, mickle is the powerful grace that lies in plants, herbs, stones, and their true qualities, for naught so vile that on earth doth live, but to the earth some special good doth give. Nor aught so good, but strained from that fair use, revolts from true birth, stumbling on abuse. Virtue itself turns vice, being misapplied, and vice sometimes by action dignified. Within the infant rind of this weak flower, poison hath residence and medicine power. For this, being smelt, with that part cheers each part, being tasted, stays all senses with the heart. Two such opposed kings encamp them still, in man as well as herbs, grace and rude will. And where the worser is predominant, full soon the canker death eats. up that plant. So before we get into Romeo entering the scene, I just want to kind of talk about what he's doing here. He's walking around with a basket. He's kind of like in a field. And he's walking around with a basket, and what he's doing is he's picking flowers, herbs, and things like that. And he's talking a little bit about these different plants. It's something that the friar is doing. It's almost kind of like a hobby of his. But he's talking a little bit about these plants. On line 15, "Oh, mickle is the powerful grace that lies in plants, herbs, stones, and their true qualities." So he's talking about these natural things. So yeah, he's a friar. He's a holy man. But he's also spiritual to the earth. And he's talking about the things that grow. And he says something really kind of interesting here is that he's talking about, like, he's holding up this herb and he's talking about how something is so beautiful in this, and yet it's also dangerous too. "Virtue itself turns vice, being misapplied, and vice sometime by action dignified. Within the infant rind of this weak flower, poison hath residence and medicine power." So in this line, he's talking about two things at once, poison and medicine. That the idea that an herb could be both things, that an herb could have the ability to heal like medicine, but too much of it could be dangerous and become poison. And I think that word is really kind of interesting here. It's one of the things that Shakespeare always, it's his go-to in a lot of his plays, is the danger of something like poison. But he says virtue itself turns to vice. And so something like too much of a good thing, too much of an herb becomes dangerous and becomes poison. Too much of a good thing can become a bad thing. So that just so happens to be what the friar is talking about here early in the morning as he's picking from the plants in his garden, perhaps, when Romeo comes walking in. Okay, so he sees him first thing. "Good morrow, father. Benedicite. What early tongue so sweet saluteth me? Young son, it argues a distempered head, so soon to bid good morrow to thy bed. Care keeps his watch in every old man's eye, and where care lodges, sleep will never lie. But where unbruised youth with unstuffed brain doth couch his limbs, there golden sleep doth reign. Therefore thy earliness doth me assure thou art unproused with some distemperature. Or, if not so, then here I hit it right. Our Romeo hath not been in bed tonight. That last is true. The sweeter rest was mine. God pardon sin. Wast thou with Rosaline?" "With Rosaline, my ghostly father? No, I have forgot thy name, and that name's woe." "That's my good son. But where hast thou been?" "I'll tell thee, ere thou ask me it again. I've been feasting with my enemy, where on a sudden one hath wounded me, but that's by me wounded. Both are remedies within thy help and holy psychic lie. I bear no hatred, blessed man, for lo, my intercession likewise steads my foe. Be plain, good son, and homely in thy drift. Riddling confession finds but riddling shrift." So you get here, the friar is like, "Man, you look like you haven't been sleeping tonight." And he's like, "Yeah, I haven't. I've been up all night." And he's in a really good mood, and he's like, "Uh-oh, you've been with Rosaline. What have you been up to? Right? You can confess here. I've got your back." And he's like, "Rosaline? Who? I totally don't even remember that girl. That was like 1 day ago. I don't remember anything about her." And so he's starting to kind of reveal that there's more to this, but he doesn't know exactly what. He's not sure exactly what it is, and he wants him to kind of tell him, "Wait, I don't understand what you're saying. So if we weren't with Rosaline, then what have you been doing?" He can tell Romeo's in a really good mood. And he's saying that, Romeo is saying that, it's the friar who could help him right now. He wants him to explain. How can he help him? "Then plainly know my heart's dear love is set on the fair daughter of rich Capulet. As mine on hers, and so hers is set on mine, and all combined save what thou must combine by holy marriage. When and where and how we met, we wooed and made exchange of vow, I'll tell thee as we pass, but this I pray, that thou consent to marry us today. So one of the other things I want to point out too is you can tell just whether it's because of the way I'm reading it or just on what you can read in the lines. This is a very poetic exchange between the two of them. The friar's been rhyming in his, and Romeo, of course, in his exchange with the friar is all in rhyme as well. And so this is very common in this play. We've seen that with quite a few conversations, but it just so happens that their conversation is riddled like poetry, and so the end line rhymes are just back and forth. Friar's like, "What?" Imagine that. He just finds out. He's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna marry a Capulet girl. I was hoping you could help me." And he's like, "Bro, what? That doesn't make any sense." "Holy Saint Francis, what changes here? Is Rosaline that thou didst love so dear, so soon forsaken? Young men's love then lies not truly in their hearts, but in their eyes. Jesu Maria! What deal of brine hath washed thy sallow cheeks for Rosaline? How much salt water thrown away in waste, to season love, that it doth not taste? The sun not yet thy sighs, for heaven clears, thy old groans ring yet in mine ancient ears. Lo, here upon thy cheek the stain doth sit of an old tear that is not washed off yet. If ever thou wast thyself, and these woes thine, thou and these woes were all for Rosaline. And art thou changed? Pronounce this sentence then. Women may fall when there's no strength in men. So the friar is like hitting him with the knowledge here. He's like, wait a second. All this time you've been crying and concerned about Rosaline. That's all you've been talking about. So all this time that we've known Romeo has been kind of cooped up and being real somber, we can now kind of infer maybe he was spending some time telling this story to the friar. The friar his confidant. And the friar's like, whoa. What's up with this? All of a sudden, like, you have forgotten all about this one and now you've moved on to the next girl. Maybe you should slow down a bit. Thou chidst me off for loving Rosaline, for doting, not for loving pupil mine, and bad'st me bury love, not in a grave, to lay one in, another out to have. I pray thee chide me not. Her I love now doth grace for grace, and love for love allow. The other did not so. Oh, she knew well. Thy love did read by rote that could not spell. But come, young waverer, come go with me. In one respect I'll thy assistant be. For this alliance may so happy prove to turn your household's rancor to pure love. Oh, let us hence! I stand on sudden haste. Wisely and slow they stumble that run fast. All right, so that's the end of scene 3. So the friar is being really, I say cautious here, right? He's worried a little bit that perhaps Romeo is jumping the gun. And as I think we can all say that perhaps Romeo may be jumping the gun a little bit, moving on to Juliet so fast after he had these feelings about Rosaline. But Romeo insists something is very different here. On line 85, chide me not, her I love now, doth grace for grace and love for love allow. The other did not so. So he is making note of the differences between Rosaline and Juliet. In this case, Juliet, it's love for love. We've talked about that in our last reading, that Juliet is reciprocating his love. So it's totally different. This is totally different. I've known her so much longer, like a day, and it's everything wonderful. The friar has him kind of calm down, but says, I'm here for you. Of course, you get the sense that these two are close, and the friar cares about Romeo. And he says this really important line here. On line 90, in one respect, I'll thy assistant be, for this alliance may so happy prove to turn your household's rancor to pure love. So the friar is noticing here that, this might not be a bad idea. That perhaps the two of you getting together could actually help bring the families together. So the friar thinks there might be more to this. He's interested. He wants to hear a little bit more about it. Okay, so with that being said, we move on to scene 4. Now, in scene 3, the friar, last time he saw Romeo, he was infatuated with Rosaline. That's the way he would think. And it's important to note here, like, only hours have passed since the party. It's the next morning. So the friar knows nothing of Juliet. He thinks he's still coming in hot, wanting to get married about Rosaline, and finds out about Juliet. In scene 4, we're going to have Benvolio and Mercutio starting off before Romeo enters in this scene. And keep in mind, too, these are Romeo's best friends. And Romeo has not had time to talk to them about Juliet either. So this has all been moving really fast, and the people who are closest to Romeo don't quite know all the details. The friar is the first to find out. But let's move on and see how these two characters handle it. Now, last night, they couldn't find him by the Capulets' orchard. Remember, because he didn't want to be found. He wanted to stay and talk to Juliet. So they've been waiting to see him and find out more about what happened after the party, obviously. Start with Mercutio. Where the devil should this Romeo be? Came he not home tonight? Not to his father's. I spoke with his man. Why? That same pale, hard-hearted wench, that Rosaline, torments him so that he will sure run mad. Tybalt, the kinsman of old Capulet, hath sent a letter to his father's house. A challenge on my life. Romeo will answer it. Any man that can write may answer a letter. Nay, he will answer the letter's master, how he dares being dared. Alas, poor Romeo, he is already dead. Stabbed with a white wench's black eye, run through the ear with a love song, the very pin of his heart cleft with the blind bow-boy's butt shaft. And is he a man to encounter Tybalt? Why, what is Tybalt? More than Prince of Cats. Oh, he's the courageous captain of compliments. He'll fight as see you sing prick song. He keeps time, distance, and proportion. He rests his minim rests, 1, 2, and the third into your bosom. The very butcher of a silk button. A duelist. A gentleman of the very first house. Of the first and second cause. Ah, the immortal passado. The punto reverso. The hi! The what? The pox of such antic, lip-sync, affecting fantasticos. These new tuners of accent. By Jesu, a very good blade, a very tall man, a very good whore. Why, is not this a lamentable thing, grand sir, that we should be thus afflicted with these strange flies, these fashion mongers, these pardon me's, who stand so much on the new form that they cannot sit at ease on the old bench. Oh, their bones, their bones. So, one of the first things I want to point out here in this scene is that Benvolio makes mention of a letter that was sent to the Montague house from Tybalt. And there's mention of a challenge here. And we want to kind of hold on to this and keep this in our memory a little bit, because this is something that's kind of meant to almost be like a black cloud that's hovering over a little bit. Tybalt is still offended. You better not show up at a party uninvited when Tybalt's around, because he is going to hold a grudge. All right, so he's kind of issued a challenge to Romeo. Now, if we didn't figure that Tybalt was a dangerous guy, Mercutio is talking about him being dangerous, okay? So, on page 805, he is talking a little bit about Mercutio, and he kind of says on line 18 and 19 that he is a little bit more than just appearance to be a tough guy. He actually is kind of a challenge. He spends time talking about the way he fights, and the things he's describing here about the 1, 2, third, a duelist, passado, the second cause, a punto reverso. He's talking about sword fighting. And so these mentions of sword fighting here, this thrust with a sword, he's actually pretty skilled. So Tybalt is dangerous. He's not only a hothead and a saucy boy, as his uncle called him, he is also dangerous. And here's Romeo, who's being essentially challenged by this dangerous fighter. And that's the thing, is that, there are people who are fighters and there are people who are lovers, right? And we've heard that saying before. I'm not a lover, I'm a fighter. Or I'm not a fighter, I'm a lover. Yeah, that's probably the one. I'm not a lover. I'm not a fighter, I'm a lover. This would be the opposite here. This situation is a little more concerning if you're Romeo. Romeo doesn't spend a lot of time thinking about fighting. He's not interested in the family feud. But somebody like Tybalt lives for this stuff. All right. Never mind the fact that Romeo has actually fallen for a Capulet. That's a whole different set of problems. But in this case, just the fact that Romeo isn't a skilled fighter, isn't big on fighting, that kind of makes him at a disadvantage here. And Mercutio was hinting at it a little bit. He mentioned the idea, our poor Romeo, he is already dead. Now, he's kind of joking along with the idea that he's dead because of him being, heartbroken, essentially, so caught up on Rosaline, as he believes. But it's also that Tybalt does pose a little bit of a threat. So we're going to kind of hold on to that idea and keep that for a later time. But Romeo is going to enter, and they're finally going to find out a little bit more as to where the hell he went last night. Here comes Romeo! Here comes Romeo! Without his roe, like a dried herring. Oh, flesh, flesh, how art thou fishified? Now is he for the numbers that Petrarch followed in. Laura to his lady was a kitchen wench. Mary, she had a better love to be rhyme her. Dido a dowry. Cleopatra a gypsy. Helen a hero. Hildings and harlots. Thisbe a grey eye or so, but not to purpose. Signor Romeo, bonjour. There's a French salutation to your French slop. You gave us the counterfeit fairly last night. Good morrow to you both. What counterfeit did I give you? The slip, sir. The slip. Can you not conceive? Pardon, good Mercutio. My business was great, and in such a case as mine a man may strain courtesy. That's as much as to say, such a case as yours constrains a man to bow in the hams, meaning to curtsy. Thou hast most kindly hit it, a most courteous exposition. Nay, I am the very pink of courtesy. A pink for flower? Right. Why, then, is my pump well flowered? A sure wit. Follow me this jest now, till thou hast worn out thy pump, that, when the single soul of it is worn, the jest may remain, and after wearing solely singular. A single-souled jest. Solely singular for the singleness. Come between us, good Benvolio. My wits faint. Swits and spurts, swits and spurs. Oh, I'll cry a match. Nay, if our wits run the wild goose chase, I am done. For thou hast more of the wild goose in one of thy wits than I'm sure I have in my whole 5. Was I with you there for the goose? Thou wast never with me for anything when thou wast not there for the goose. I will bite thee by the ear for that jest. Nay, good goose, bite not. Thy wit's a very bitter sweeting. It is a most sharp sauce. And is it not, then, well served into a sweet goose? Oh, here's a wit of chivalry that stinches from an inch narrow to an ell broad. I stretch it out for that word broad, which added to the goose proves the far and wide a broad goose. Why, is not this better now than groaning for love? Now art thou sociable? Now art thou Romeo? Now art thou art, by art as well as by nature. For this driveling love is like a great natural that runs lolling up and down to hide his bauble in a hole. Stop there, stop there. Thou desirest me to stop in my tail against the hair. Thou wouldest else have made thy tail large. Oh, thou art deceived. I would have made it short, for I was come to the whole depth of my tail, and meant indeed to occupy the argument no longer. All right, so I know there's a lot going on there. And what really is going on there is, I would say, more of a Renaissance time period, kind of two guys BSing back and forth. And what mainly comes of it, as they're bantering back and forth, and this is something that Romeo is actually quite good at, And we find out from Mercutio here on line 83, why is not this better now than groaning for love? It's like he got his friend back. He feels like, wow, this is the guy. There he is. I was wondering where he was. Romeo's been so down in the dumps lately. It's nice to see him, kind of joking around and having a good time. Now, as the audience, we know why he's joking around. We know why, because he's in a good mood. He's feeling good because of Juliet. Mercutio thinks that perhaps he's moved on and gotten rid of his sad feelings about Rosaline, but he doesn't know about Juliet. All he knows is he has his friend back, and that's what matters most to him. So they can banter. They can have this witty back and forth that he's missed. Okay? So that's what's happening there. When all of a sudden Romeo looks and he sees somebody coming in that he doesn't necessarily recognize here. Here's a goodly gear. Enter the nurse and her man Peter. And notice here what Romeo says. A sail! A sail! He actually is talking about the way she comes walking in. The nurse would be played by this big, hefty man in the time when it would first be played on stage. And this would be coming in, and she's walking in with her in her gown, and he's saying, a sail, a sail. It's kind of a shot at the nurse, like she's so big. She's big as like a boat. So that's kind of rough, for the person that your future wife loves so dearly as the nurse. A sail, a sail. Two, a shirt and a smock. Peter? None. My fan, Peter! Good Peter, to hide her face, for her fan's the fairer face. God ye good morrow, gentlemen. God ye good den, fair gentlewoman. Is it good den? 'Tis no less, I tell ye, for the bawdy hand of the dial is now upon the prick of noon. Out upon you! What a man are you! One gentlewoman that God hath made himself to mar. By my troth, it is well said, for himself to mar, quoth they. Gentlemen, can any of you tell me where I may find the young Romeo? I can tell you, but young Romeo will be older when you have found him than he was when you sought him. I am the youngest of that name, for fault of a worse. You say well. Yea, the worse well. Very well took, I faith, wisely. If you be he, sir, I desire some confidence with you. She will indict him to some supper. Abhorred, so ho. What hast thou found? No hare, sir, unless a hare, sir, in a Lenten pie. That is something stale and hoar ere it be spent. An old hare whore is very good meat in Lent. But a hare that is whore is too much for a score when it whores ere it be spent. Romeo, will you come to your father's? We'll to dinner thither. I will follow you. Farewell, ancient lady. Farewell, lady. So Mercutio is being a little rough on the nurse here. He sings this song, and there's a lot of playing on words. And you guys, we've talked a little bit about puns here in prior videos, and you guys have been keeping an eye on that. There's a lot of play on words, wordplay. And notice the word whore, an old hare whore. Obviously, that word has an alternate meaning. And so Mercutio's being a little, I'd say, crass and rude to the nurse. He's saying some really kind of inappropriate things to her as she's there. He doesn't know who this old woman is. And for that matter, Romeo doesn't know who she is too. He's kind of playing around with the idea. She's looking for Romeo. He's not being really forthcoming that he is Romeo. He's kind of joking around with her. He has no idea that this is Juliet's nurse. Remember, Juliet at the balcony said that she would send for him tomorrow morning. And so that's why the nurse is there. He doesn't realize all of this. And so it'd be like if him and his buddies are hanging out and they're being kind of inappropriate, he's not necessarily acting the way he would around his family, or in this case, his future wife's family. he's not really treating her with a whole lot of respect until he realizes, holy crap, this is somebody here from Juliet. So Mercutio leaves with Benvolio, and the nurse wants to talk to him, obviously in confidence about Juliet. I pray you, sir, what saucy merchant was this that was so full of his ropery? A gentleman, nurse, that loves to hear himself talk, and will speak more in a minute than he will stand to in a month. And speak anything against me, I'll take him down, and a world lustier than he is at 20 such jacks. If I cannot, I'll find those that shall. Scurvy knave! I am none of his flirt gills. I am none of his skein mates. And thou must stand by too, and suffer every knave to use me at his pleasure. I saw no man use you at his pleasure. If I had, my weapon should quickly have been out. I warrant you, I dare draw as soon as another man, if I see occasion in a good quarrel, and the law on my side. So the nurse was offended by Mercutio, and actually turns on this guy Peter, who is the guy he's like an attendant with her, kind of like assisting her. And it's like, where were you at on this? You should be defending me. And he's like, I'm sorry, I was laughing. I thought he was kind of funny. But he's obviously, the nurse is kind of a comical character. She's meant to kind of suffer alone on stage there with Mercutio and banter with him. So she was a little offended, but nonetheless, she's there to talk to Romeo and finally feels like she's got his attention. And notice how Romeo's, his feelings towards this woman have now changed as he's starting to put two and two together as who she is. Now, afore God, I am so vexed that every part about me quivers. Scurvy knave! Pray you, sir, a word. And, as I told you, my young lady bid me inquire you out. What she bid me say, I will keep to myself. But first, let me tell ye, if ye should lead her in a fool's paradise, as they say, it were a very gross kind of behavior, as they say, for the gentlewoman is young, and therefore, if you should deal double with her, truly, it were an ill thing to be offered to any gentlewoman, and very weak dealing. Nurse, commend me to thy lady and mistress. I protest unto thee. Good heart. And, in faith, I will tell her as much. Lord, Lord, she will be a joyful woman. Wilt thou tell her, nurse? Thou dost not mark me. I will tell her, sir, that you do protest, which, as I take it, is a gentlemanlike offer. Bid her devise some means to come to shrift this afternoon, and there she shall, at Friar Lawrence's cell, be shrived and married. Here is for thy pains. No, truly, sir, not a penny. Go to, I say you shall. This afternoon, sir? Well, she shall be there. And stay, good nurse, behind the abbey wall. Within this hour my man shall be with thee, and bring thee cords made like a tackled stair, which, to the high topgallant of my joy, must be my convoy in the secret night. Farewell. Be trusty, and I'll quit thy pains. Farewell. Commend me to thy mistress. Now, God in heaven bless thee. Hark you, sir. What sayest thou, my dear nurse? Is your man secret? Did you never hear say, two may keep counsel, putting one away? Warrant thee, my man's as true as steel. Well, sir, my mistress is the sweetest lady. Lord, Lord, when 'twas a little prating thing. Oh, there is a nobleman in town, one Paris, that would fain lay knife aboard. But she, good soul, had as leave see a toad, a very toad as I see him. As I anger her sometimes and tell her that Paris is the properer man, but I'll warrant you, when I say so, she looks as pale as any clout in the versal world. Doth not Rosemary and Romeo begin with a letter? Ay, nurse, what of that? Both with an R. Ah, Mockerer. That's the dog's name. R is for the... No, I know it begins with some other letter, and she hath the prettiest sentience of it, and you and Rosemary, and that it would you good to hear it. Commend me to thy lady. Aye, 1,000 times. Peter! Anon. Before and apace. Okay, so that's the end of this scene. Now, a few things here. The nurse, you could tell, is very protective over Juliet, just the way she talks. She mentions here on line 154, if ye should lead her in a fool's paradise, as they say, it'd be a very gross kind of behavior. For the gentlewoman is young, so she's being very cautious here. You better not be playing with her. She's young and she's naive, and you better not have any other intentions other than honesty. And Romeo is like, listen, I love her. Please say nothing but good things. Commend me to her. Let her know what I feel is true. The nurse also is going to kind of be their go-between. That the nurse is going to bring Juliet to the friar's cell. What? Well, to get married, of course, this afternoon. Some would say that's perhaps rushing it, since they've met last night and all. But regardless, the nurse is going to make sure that she makes it to Friar Lawrence's cell because that's where Romeo plans to marry her. He also makes mention here that he's going to involve his man. So this was his close confidant, somebody that he's going to send to bring some other items that they'll need. On line 177, bring the cords made like a tackle stair. And so this is it's described as a rope ladder in the margin. And so this is going to be his way to climb up the balcony to his wife at night. He's talking about having a way of a secret liaison with his wife, wife through their honeymoon. He wants to be able to have access to Juliet. And the nurse is going to help make this happen. She's a little reluctant. She actually makes mention here that that this man is he going to be in on this? So you get the idea there's a very secret dealings going on here between Romeo and the nurse and the friar and Romeo's man, that people are going to have to conspire to bring this secret marriage together. But Romeo's like, yeah, no problem. I trust him. He's true as steel. So he feels that he has some people around him that he can trust. The nurse is, again, a confidant for Juliet, similar to the way the friar is for Romeo. And so these two characters are really playing a crucial role in keeping the secret and bringing these two young lovers together for a secret wedding. All right, so that's the end of scene 4. We got through a couple of scenes there. And you can see how in Act 2, things move after the party ends in Act 1. Things are moving towards a marriage, which is really kind of sudden, of course. Like we said, it's been less than 24 hours in real time. Although so much happens in Shakespeare's plays all at once, it really kind of makes you lose track of time. You have to kind of stop and look back and be like, wait a second, this is all in the same day? Yes, this is. So Romeo, you get the feeling that he's so into Juliet that he wants to get married to her as soon as possible, which it seems like Juliet, by sending the nurse there, is really excited about as well. Okay, so that's the end of reading for today. Look on Schoology today for your questions and work on those, and there will be more tomorrow. All right, you guys take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.